Welcome my YouTube channel, Stoic Powerful Habits *, ladies and gentlemen. Have you ever stood at the edge of something powerful, something meaningful, something real, and just as you were ready to open your heart, the other person pulled away? You see the truth in their eyes. You feel the connection in their presence. And yet, instead of drawing closer, they retreat. They vanish. They grow cold. And in that moment, confusion sets in. You wonder, what did I do wrong? But here's the deeper truth. They push you away because they want you more than they're prepared to admit. This isn't weakness, it's fear. This isn't indifference, it's emotional overload. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And when someone meets you, the real youth version of you that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't crumble under pressure, it terrifies them. Why? Because you represent something they buried. Because you reflect back to them what they are not yet ready to become. They want you, yes! But the intensity of that desire makes them feel exposed. Okay, it makes them feel out of control. And people fear losing control more than they fear loneliness. So what do? They push, they run, they test. And this is where your stoic power must activate. Because the average man would chase. The average man would seek validation. The average man would lose himself to win her. But you are not average. You are forged in silence. You are molded in patience. You are a king who understands that emotions may arise, but only the disciplined endure. You do not chase what runs. You do not explain yourself to confusion. You stand still. You hold frame. You let the storm pass. Let them retreat. Let them test your absence. Let them discover that what they're pushing away is the very thing they'll crave once they feel the void. When they come back, and if they do, you won't respond with desperation. You'll respond with grounded calm. You'll look them in the eye, not with need, but with clarity. And you'll ask yourself, does this serve my peace? Does this align with my power? Because the truth is, most people aren't afraid of losing you. They're afraid of being seen by you. They push you away because you pierce through the layers. You see them, not just the mask they wear, but the pain they hide. That power, that presence, that stillness you hold when they become distant. That's not weakness. That's not coldness. That is stoic masculinity. That is emotional dominance. That is true self-respect. And here's what happens when you embrace it. They start to question their own actions. They wonder why your silence feels louder than their words. They feel your absence like thunder in their bones. Because unlike every other, man, they've pushed away. You didn't beg to stay. You understood that what is truly meant for you will not need to be chastised, will rise to meet you at your level. So, if you're in this season right now, if you're being pushed away by someone who once held your gaze with fire in their eyes, pause. Don't react. Reflect. Don't crumble. Center yourself. And remember, you are the mountain. Let the wind howl. Let the rain pour. But the mountain never moves. Stand firm, grounded in your worth. And watch how the world and even those who fled start to orbit you again. Because power never chases. Power attracts. Thank you. Stay stoic. Stay unshakable. Asterisk, there is a peculiar contradiction within the human soul. Silent war between the heart's deep yearning and the mind's anxious guard. One reaches forward with trembling hands, aching for union, while the other clenches in retreat, protecting itself from imagined harm. It is here where many misinterpret desire as indifference and closeness as resistance. Yet, if you would look beneath the behavior, if you would pierce beyond the veil of action, you would see the hidden hunger. Those who push away often do so, not out of rejection, but out of sacred self-preservation. To want something so dearly is to open oneself to loss, to exposure, to the collapse of identity. It is one thing to want. It is another thing entirely to be seen in that wanting. For when one desires deeply, they become transparent. The facade fades. The walls crumble. The protective armor that once shielded them from judgment, pain, and uncertainty melts in the presence of what they long for. And with that dissolving, there is fear not of you, but of themselves. It is easier for many to live in the shadows of guarded affection than to stand in the full light of vulnerability. For in that light, the illusion dies. In that light, they must confront every hidden wound, every unhealed scar, every belief they've carried about love, abandonment, and worth. You become the mirror, not of their flaws, but of their forgotten truth. Because they are not yet ready to meet that truth, they recoil. They retreat not from lack of desire, but because the desire burns too brightly. They have not yet learned to live in the fire without flinching. To understand this is to be liberated from confusion. You no longer ask why they withdrew. You no longer internalize their distance as a measure of your value. Instead, you perceive clearly their actions speak not of indifference, but of unpreparedness. Not everyone can carry what they call in prayer. Not everyone is ready for the very thing they claim to seek. The soul may cry out, but the mind remains in bondage. And so, the push becomes a paradox. They desire you and yet cannot hold you. Now consider this. What does it mean to be wanted? When someone longs for your presence, your energy, your light, there is a gravitational pull. It stirs something primal and sacred within them. But if that pull threatens the structure of the ego, if it threatens the walls they've carefully built over the years to protect themselves from emotional collapse, then the push becomes inevitable. You are not just a person to them. A disruption. Okay. A beautiful, divine disruption that shakes loose the illusions they've clung to. And so, they push. Not because you are too much, but because you are too true. Your very being calls them out of hiding. Steadiness reveals their inner chaos. Your love exposes their fear. And for one who has not yet faced himself, this is unbearable. He would rather live within the familiar torment of solitude than surrender to the unknown that your presence demands. There is another layer, one that unfolds like a hidden scroll within the human psyche. It is the need for control. When one desires, one becomes vulnerable. Vulnerability feels like surrender. And surrender to the unawakened mind feels like death. In this state, control becomes survival. To yield to desire would mean losing the upper hand. It would mean allowing the self to be led by something unseen, something felt rather than managed. And for many, this is terrifying. He who fears loss fears connection. He who must be in control cannot rest in love. The more one wants you, the more they feel themselves losing the illusion of dominance. And so, they grasp at the only tool they know: distance. They believe that by withdrawing, by pushing you away, they reclaim their power. But this is a false power, one born not of inner mastery, but of inner fracture. It is the voice of the child who once reached out and was denied, now echoing in the man who fears being denied again. You must not take this personally. It was never about you. It is about what your presence awakens in him. You have stirred the slumbering sea. You have roused the parts of him that were never taught to swim. So he pushes, hoping that in distance he might find safety again. But safety does not lie in retreat, keyed. It lies in courage. And courage is what few are willing to practice when their emotional framework has been built upon avoidance. Let the vision form clearly in your mind. The moment he senses how deeply he wants you, he also senses how deeply he might lose you. Wanting you becomes a risk of disappointment, a risk of rejection, a risk of losing the self he has spent years preserving. You become a mirror, not of pleasure, but of pressure. not because you demand it, but because your very presence makes honest the things he has denied. There is nothing wrong with the desire. It is sacred. But what one does with that desire that reveals his level of consciousness. A man who has met himself, who has stood in the stillness of his own being, does not fear what he wants. He welcomes it. He allows it. He rests in the knowing that to want is not weakness. It is power when that wanting flows through a stable vessel. But a man who has not yet encountered his own soul, who has only ever lived through defense and detachment, he cannot yet trust what he wants. For him to want is to suffer, but it is to lose control. And to lose control is to unravel. So he pushes you away, not because you are unsafe, but because he has not yet learned how to feel safe within himself. Your task is not to chase. Your task is not to convince. Your task is to hold the posture of inner certainty, knowing that the push has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with his awakening. Some wake slowly. Some never wake. Some must lose what they want before they learn how to receive it. So stand firm in your presence. Become unshakable in your knowing. Be still in your power. And let those who cannot yet hold what they want learn the lesson only distance can teach. They push you away because they want you most, but they do not yet know how to want without fear. And so the soul must travel through its own wilderness before it returns to the oasis it once ran from. Be the oasis. Be the calm. Be the flame that does not flicker even when the wind blows. That is the way. Asterisk, the root of withdrawal often hides. Not in the present, but in the past, long buried, yet ever alive in the unseen depths of memory. One does not flee because of who you are now, but because of what they once experienced and never truly left behind. Every act of pulling away is a symptom, not the sickness. Signal, not the source. What pushes them into silence, what builds walls in place of bridges, is not their lack of desire. It's the echo of wounds formed in the tender years where love meant uncertainty and closeness meant eventual collapse. Childhood holds the blueprint. Within its quiet corridors lie the moments when love was given and then taken away. When affection was conditional, when presence was inconsistent. The young mind cannot reason with inconsistency, only absorbs, records, and repeats. They were once embraced and then abandoned, praised and then punished, chosen and then ignored. The soul developed a survival tactic. It whispered, connection is danger. Intimacy leads to pain. These conclusions did not arrive through logic. They were born through experience, solidified by emotion, and woven into the very identity that now resists what it once cried out. For thus, when this person meets you, when they feel the raw, powerful potential of something real their body remembers before their mind understands. You see confusion in their eyes, not because they doubt your worth, but because they doubt safety. You speak love, but their nervous system interprets it as a signal of incoming loss. You offer closeness, but it reminds them of what closeness once cost. They are not rejecting the present, they are defending the past. What they fear is not you, but the repetition of abandonment. They anticipate betrayal before it arrives. They create distance to stay in control of the eventual ending. To open up would mean to relive what they never truly healed. The pain that lives in the subconscious becomes the architect of their actions, until those attachments are revised in the inner realm. Until those wounds are acknowledged and no longer repressed. No amount of external love can override the internal script. You must recognize that you are not fighting their current logic. You are confronting ancient fear. You are not merely engaging a person, but the inner child within them that still hides in the corner, remembering the day connection turned into heartbreak. And unless that child is met, unless those memories are rewritten with new vision, they will continue to push away the very thing they most desire. Pure and uninhibited is the movement of life through a person. But for the undisciplined soul, desire becomes chaotic. When untrained, it consumes rather than creates. There are those who want deeply, yet in their wanting, they become ruled by impulse. They do not know how to hold the flame of longing without being burned by it. And so they oscillate between pursuit and panic, between hunger and hesitation. This is the realm where emotion dictates action, where the waves of feeling toss the individual in every direction but stillness. But to master desire is to move from mere emotional reaction to conscious selection. This is where discipline enters not as repression, but as structure. It is not to deny the flame, but to place it within a lamp that guides, not blinds. Discipline is the masculine container through which desire flows with clarity and direction. Without it, one is a slave to the fleeting moods of the moment. With it, one becomes a creator, not a beggar of connection. It is here that true power resides, not in the loud performance of desire, but in the quiet authority of choosing what one will and will not allow to command his life. The Stoics did not kill emotion, they mastered its influence. To feel something strongly is not weakness. To be ruled by it is. There is a difference between acknowledging your longing for someone and allowing that longing to dominate your peace. The former is awareness. The latter is enslavement. The one who pushes you away may very well feel a torrent of desire, because they have not cultivated the discipline to sit with that desire without reacting to it. They default to escape. Escape gives them the illusion of control. It allows them to believe that by severing the tie, they are preserving their independence. But they are not free. They are simply driven by fear in a different disguise. When someone cannot hold their own desire without falling apart, they will blame the desire itself. They will see the one they want as the source of their internal chaos. And in doing so, they will try to eliminate the mirror instead of confronting the image it reflects. You become too much, not because you are overwhelming, but because they are unprepared. Your consistency exposes their instability. Your patience reveals their restlessness. Your calm becomes a confrontation with their storm. So they do what the undisciplined always do, they sabotage. Not because they do not feel, but because they feel too much and have never learned how to bear it. They create problems where none exist. They invent reasons to pull away. They reinterpret kindness as manipulation, presence as pressure, and love as control. But what they are truly reacting to is the discomfort of being unable to hide anymore. Your presence demands they grow, not by force, but by frequency. You hold a standard they have not yet risen to. And instead of asking themselves, why do I feel unsafe here? They unconsciously decide this must be unsafe. They twist the narrative not to harm you, but to protect the self-image that says they are not yet ready. If you chase, you affirm their fear. Few demand you feed their sense of inadequacy. Steady and certain you offer them something no one else has, the permission to confront themselves without judgment. In your discipline, you give them a model. In your restraint, you give them space. In your detachment, you give them a mirror to their chaos desire. When directed, becomes a tool of transformation. But for that to happen, it must be placed under the authority of the will. This is the essence of discipline, not rigid control, but sovereign alignment. When you are aligned, you do not act out of desperation. You do not attempt to manipulate reality to match your emotional urgency. Instead, you breathe, you observe, you move with precision. Those who are not yet aligned will mistake your composure for indifference. They will feel the heat of their desire and wonder why it does not move you. But what they don't understand is that your stillness is not lack, it is strength. You have already learned that reacting to every impulse only breeds more chaos. You have seen the futility of chasing what is not anchored in readiness. And so you stand not because you are cold, but because you are warm enough within. Not because you do not feel, but because you have felt deeply and chosen to master that feeling. Rather than be mastered by it, let them retreat. Let them wrestle with their wounds. Let them come to terms with the war between their desire and their discipline. If they are meant to rise, they will. If not, they will drift. But your role is not to carry them. Your role is to hold the frequency of what is possible and allow those who are ready to rise and meet it. In this way, you become both the invitation and the standard. You no longer pursue what cannot sustain you. You no longer bend for those who have not yet chosen themselves. You remain in alignment. And alignment draws to itself only what is ready to match its depth. Asterisk, there is a silent force within a man who has awakened to himself. Aloud, not showy, but unmistakably felt. It is the calm center of a storm, the still axis around which all motion spins. He does not pursue. He does not beg. He does not crumble when met with resistance. Instead, he becomes more deeply rooted in himself. This is the masculine frame, not as society describes it. Key, but as it is known, inwardly an invisible structure of being that governs all expression, all emotion, all response. Okay? When a man is fixed in this frame, he becomes immovable, not by force, but by alignment. This masculine stillness is not void of emotion. It is the master of emotion. It is not coldness, but depth. Okay. It is not disinterest, but discernment. When such a man enters into a dynamic where another pulls away, when love turns. To retreat, he does not flinch. He does not grasp. He does not fall into the illusion that value is proven through effort. He knows that effort born from fear only feeds the very doubt it seeks to dissolve. He remains still. In that stillness, there is more magnetism than in 1,000 acts of persuasion. What most do not understand is that the frame is not something one does. It is something one is. It is not a performance to maintain attraction. It is the remembrance of origin. The masculine, in its essence, is not reactive. Okay. It does not seek validation outside itself. Okay. When she pulls away, when her words grow fewer, when the warmth cools, the man in his frame does not chase the fading light. He becomes the sun. Okay. He becomes the source. This is polarity, the natural dance between energies. Feminine energy expands and contracts, attests, it flows. It seeks safety not in words, but in the presence of stability. When a man abandons his own center to follow her into emotional turbulence, she cannot feel safe, no matter how sincere his intention. Right? It is not the chasing that draws her back. It is the unwavering essence. Right? It is the man who does not lose himself to gain another. It is the man who remains, not as a statue of pride, but as a beacon of self-awareness. When she distances herself, it is often not because love has died, but because she must know whether the man she desires is rooted or merely reacting. She must feel the ground beneath him before she trusts her surrender. She does not always do this consciously. It is the ancient language of energy, older than words. She pulls not to escape, but to test the boundaries of his presence. She asks silently, will you follow me into my storm, or will you remain the sky? The man who understands this does not collapse under the pressure of uncertainty. He does not mistake temporary withdrawal for final rejection. He knows that. Every relationship dances with polarity, and his role is not to control her current, but to embody his own. He becomes the frame through which her waves move. He holds, not her, but the space between them. And that space is what draws her back. Not his persuasion, not his pursuit, but his peace. This peace cannot be faked. Pews. It must be lived. It is the fruit of inward labor, of a man who has met himself in silence, who has walked through the fire of self-abandonment and returned whole. He no longer seeks to be chosen because he has already chosen himself. He no longer fears her absence because he has learned the fullness of solitude. And so when she tests, when she withdraws, When she questions, he does not defend, he embodies. And yet, within this silent power lies another truth, often hidden. Yet, just as potent, the other does not always retreat from lack of feeling. Many times, the pulling away is born of the very intensity they feel, but cannot yet name. When one encounters something that feels real, something that resonates beyond surface attraction, it awakens a deep and terrifying question within. Can I trust this? And when the answer is unclear, distance becomes the chosen path, not to punish the other, but to seek certainty within. Certainty is not found in the words we speak to them. It is found in the unspoken transmission of presence. When the one you desire begins to push away, to question, to doubt, they are not always walking away from you. They are walking toward the part of themselves that must decide if they are ready to meet you in truth. And in that walk, they listen not to your voice, but to your silence, to your steadiness, to your detachment. Detachment is not a lack of care. It is the release of control. It is the knowing that what is real cannot be threatened and what is not real cannot be forced. It is the surrender of outcome and the mastery of self. When you release the need to make them stay, to make them understand, to make them feel safe, you allow them to arrive at their own truth. And that is the only truth that matters. They must feel the container. They must feel the depth without pressure, the space without force. This is what invites them back, not as a reaction, but as a choice. They must choose to return, and they can only choose freely when you do not manipulate their absence. In this space, you do not chase. You do not explain. You do not shrink to fit their fears or rise to match their doubts. You simply remain. You become the living embodiment of that which cannot be shaken. And in your being, you reflect to them the peace they have not yet found. That reflection is more powerful than any message, any confession, any attempt to convince. This is why stillness is the highest form of expression. It is the invitation without words. It's the call without sound. It is the resonance of a man who knows who he is. And in that knowing, he becomes undeniable. So when they test, when they pull away, when they press against the edges of what you offer, do not answer with fear. Do not react with need. God. Fill the silence with noise. Simply return to your center. Stand in it. Breathe in it. Live from it. And let them find what they are searching for, not through your grasp, but through your gravity. You are not here to convince anyone to see your value. You are here to see it so clearly within yourself that no amount of distance can blur it. This is the essence of true masculine power, not in force, but in frequency, not in action, but in alignment, not in words, but in presence. And presence is the rarest gift. It cannot be bought. It cannot be imitated. It cannot be taken. It can only be cultivated. And once it is, all things that belong to you will come, not because you reach for them, because they recognize themselves in your stillness. Asterisk. There is within man a strange impulse to destroy the very thing he yearns for. Not out of malice, but out of unconscious belief. A belief formed long before reason could shape words. A belief so embedded in the depths of his psyche that it governs without question and acts without pause. This is the mechanism of self-sabotage. Invisible architect crafting repeated cycles of pain, disappointment, and distance, even from what he calls his deepest desire. To want something deeply is to expose oneself to the possibility of having it, and to have it is to risk losing it. In this space, the mind of the wounded man grows afraid. Afraid that what has been found will slip away. Afraid that closeness will turn to abandonment. Afraid that joy, once tasted, will turn bitter. So before the dream is fully landed, he destroys it. Not consciously, not with clarity, but with subtle acts of avoidance, rejection, accusation, or withdrawal. Each act silently whispers the same message. I am not worthy of this. He may, not speak these words aloud, but his being vibrates them. His posture, his silence, his sudden coldness, his refusal to open his heart, these are all echoes of that hidden thought. Okay. He believes himself unworthy, and so he cannot permit himself to receive. Or what he calls confusion is really resistance. What he describes as uncertainty is the mind protecting him from the fear of loss by manufacturing distance before closeness can root too deeply. He pushes away not because he does not want, but because he has never been taught how to hold what he desires. To receive is an act of allowing. But one cannot allow what he secretly believes he must avoid. If love is offered and he has only ever known it through pain, he cannot hold it with peace. He will twist it, question it, reinterpret it until it matches the chaos within. And in that chaos, he finds familiarity. Pain, after all, is a trusted companion, but peace, that is foreign, that is frightening, till he revises his concept of self, until he changes what he truly believes he deserves. He will continue to push away the good that finds him, and it will not matter how sincere you are, how pure your love, how present your energy. If he sees himself as unworthy, your offering will feel like a threat, not because of what it is, but because of what it reveals. Your presence reveals the parts of him he has hidden from, the parts that doubt, fear, and deny. This revelation can be too much. It can overwhelm. And when overwhelmed, the man reverts. He does not rise to meet the new possibility. He collapses into the known past. His reactions are not to you. They are to the image of himself that feels exposed in your light. When he sabotages, he is not destroying you. He is protecting himself from facing the version of him he is not yet ready to become. And yet, there is a greater truth that holds even more power. It is the mystery of indifference. A sacred indifference, not born of bitterness or disinterest, but of realization. To be indifferent is not to stop caring, it is to no longer depend. It is to sever the need to be chosen in order to feel whole. It is the deep, unshakable knowing that all things that belong to you are already yours by law of consciousness, and that anything that withdraws is only making space for what matches. Your truest state, indifference, is not detachment from people. It is detachment from outcome. It is the mastery of presence without possession. The man who has cultivated this inner stillness does not chase, does not perform. He simply remains. Not as a tactic, not as a test, but because he understands that the chase is to confess lack. And he knows that lack is an illusion created by a mind still ruled by fear. He walks into every connection, not needing to win, not fearing loss, but holding the calm, knowing that nothing real can be threatened. He is not indifferent because he has no heart. He is indifferent because he has reclaimed it. He has given it back to himself, and in doing so, removed it from the hands of others who once held it as leverage. This emotional indifference is the highest form of self-respect. It is the energy that no longer reacts to being pushed away, because it knows that being pushed is not rejection, but redirection. It does not flinch when affection withdraws. It does not question its worth in the face of absence. It stands. It observes. It holds its ground, not as a wall, but as a field that allows all things to come and go, knowing that only what is resonant will remain. In this state, one becomes unchained from the patterns of need, no longer dancing to the rhythm of another's uncertainty, no longer twisting to fit into the gaps of another's self-doubt. Instead, there is clarity, there is sovereignty, there is peace. A peace that says, I do not need to be understood to understand. I do not need to be pursued to feel valuable. I do not need to hold you to keep my wholeness. This is what breaks the pattern. This is what silences the saboteur. When you stop engaging the push with pull. When you stop mirroring their chaos with confusion of your own, a new frequency enters the space. It is the frequency of the man who no longer argues with loss, who no longer negotiates with doubt, who no longer gives his power away to stay in someone's story. When this frequency is present, it creates a powerful tension, a holy contrast. The one who pulled away now feels the absence, not as punishment, but as purity. Not as manipulation, but as truth. And in that truth, they are faced with themselves, not with your need, but with their mirror. If they rise, it will be by choice. If they return, it will be from awakening. And if they don't, it will be because they were never truly aligned in the first place. Protect your peace, not by avoiding emotion, but by alchemizing it. It turns longing into presence. It transforms loss into clarity. It releases the other from responsibility for your internal state. And in doing so, it releases you from bondage. You are no longer the effect of someone else's confusion. You are the cause of your own inner stability. And this is the hidden power. When you stop making their retreat mean something about you, you stop being controlled by their return. You begin to live as the source, not the seeker. You stop waiting and you start creating. You stop chasing outcomes and you begin embodying the vision. For those who are meant to stay, your presence will be enough. For those who are not, no amount of effort will substitute for readiness. And so you remain not in arrogance, but in alignment. Not in pride, but in purpose. Not as a reaction to their absence, but as a remembrance of your truth. The one who pushes you away may not understand why, but you, in stillness, do. You see the fear, you see the doubt, you see the old stories playing out behind new words. But instead of becoming entangled, you step back. You let them play out their inner world, knowing that your world remains undisturbed. Right? This is what frees you. This is what purifies love. This is what restores the self. Not in possession, not in pursuit, but in presence. The kind of presence that does not cling. The kind that does not chase. The kind that holds the door open, not out of hope, but out of wholeness. And it is in this wholeness that all things align. Not through effort, but through essence. Not through force, but through faith.